Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Allow me to extend my warmth to people who have managed to stay awake. Some people have managed to sacrifice their weekend afternoons or brunch in various time zones that you are at to listen to about a speech that was never heard, and it makes it even more pertinent, especially as we revisit some of these conversations, as and when we are lost in the labyrinth of finding solutions to the problem that the world is facing today, not just South Asia, let alone India. And we will dig deep into it. But before that, props to the Radical Books Collective and the wonderful team, not least from the Warscapes magazine that we have been reading phenomenally, but also Bhakti in particular to you for the leadership and also trying to bring different courageous dialogues together, be it Middle East, with Africa, India, South Asia, and expanding furthermore to the global axis. In addition to Bhakti, I also would like to shout out to friends who are here, who have joined. Please know I appreciate you, and also to the friends that we'll make. Annihilation of Caste is a text about caste, but it's a very unlikely text. It is not a text that is concerned solely with defining caste. It's not a text that is invested in ascribing a particular understanding of caste, or even it is not a text that is solely invested in propounding the ethics, morality, and hermeneutics of caste. Annihilation of Caste, as the title goes, is about annihilating caste. So it's a phenomenal exegesis where a text itself begins with a proclamation that the topic I am going to deal with is not going to be about the discussions that we want to have, but it is about a text that needs, it's about a concept that needs to be annihilated. And I think this is a foregrounding of Ambedkar's genius, which he brings so eloquently, not least in Annihilation of Caste, but also other marvelous texts. We are still digging into his archive. I was just looking at a text of Fanon's Alienation of Freedom, where much of his writings are still coming out. Ambedkar surpasses much of those written work, monographs, and there are yet many more to come. When we Annihilation of Caste is a state of arrival, and it's a stage. We need to read back as to what led that text, in fact, sonic, to come. Ambedkar, by early, especially 1919, South Borough Commission establishes himself as a foremost, if not the most important leaders of the untouchables, and someone who is fighting for the social justice as well as political and economic reforms in India. A young age, comes back from his overseas trip with stops in Colombia, his alma mater, and LSE, his alma mater. At LSE, Ambedkar writes his DSc in economics, very much inspired during the time, tries to enroll for his third PhD, the two PhDs being first at Columbia, second at LSE, third at University of Bonn. And what he wants to do at Bonn, Germany is the center of sociological and Indological studies, one of the leading institutions of the time that was studying seriously the Hindu theology as well as languages and language of the Oriental at Bonn. So he admits himself, and a fluent himself, writes him a CV in a German language. He was a polyglot. We could trace 11 languages that he had excelled into. One of the language actually ended up reproducing as a dictionary of the Pali canon into English. Brief biography of Ambedkar. Ambedkar is the 14th and the last child of Ramji Sapkal and Bhimabai. Both mother and father come from military background. In fact, mother is a daughter of the then Mahar military gentry, and Ramji Sapkal, of course, is also serving in the British Army. He is a teacher teaching English language. He is elevated to the rank of Subedar. Military institution is an exciting space for untouchables to not only access the Bohemia, but also to consider their worth equal to their value, not equal to their caste. And this is one of the very few institutions that was giving incredible amount of support, albeit limited. Nevertheless, it offered opportunities for people from the untouchable backgrounds to stand tight, wear nice clothes, trim their hair, where it was prevalent that if there is a social boycott, no barber will even cut the hair of untouchables. They have to. It's a social boycott. It's the ostracization, and that's why caste system becomes so pernicious, because the punishment of caste is not against individual, but it is against the community. So institution in the military offered that support. Ambedkar is born in the military headquarters of war in now what we call Mahu, Madhya Pradesh. He's the 14th and last child, youngest child. His mom dies shortly after his birth. But his father himself, being a strict disciplinarian, inducts Ambedkar, his beloved last son, who was motherless child, into proper care and giving him knowledge and information of various world literatures, not least the English, but he's also asking Ambedkar to read Ramayana and Mahabharata. Why is that so? Because he says within Ramayana and Mahabharata canon, there are some Shudras and untouchables who have proudly claimed their identity and fought against that. There is a glimmer of a hope that Ramji sees in that. And Ramji himself is a Kabir Panthi. Kabir, the flow of beautiful river-like thoughts, who really brings out the best of humanity for us to witness, very much continuing the legacy of Ravidas. So that being the background of Ambedkar's kind of foundation, Ambedkar is then becomes the first untouchable to graduate 10th grade. He matriculates, the first untouchable in the Bombay region to ever graduate is Ambedkar. Not least that, he goes on to pursue his BA in the prestigious Elphinstone College in Bombay, which still stands today, which is again one of the important locations of education and knowledge during British Raj in the western region of India, where he gets BA and he's again facilitated. Now, here's the thing. When Ambedkar graduates in his 10th grade, 10th standard as we call, the untouchables of local community decide to facilitate him, because no one ever had graduated with a 10th grade. So that's the kind of, they wanted to celebrate. His father, of course, refuses, saying this will go into his head and, we want him to pursue. Nevertheless, the event happens. And Ambedkar not stops only there, goes on to pursue his master's at Columbia, then the top institution of learning, especially of the world and as well as the Oriental. So with this background, when Ambedkar comes onto the stage, 1930s is a very important decade for him, because he is now not only asking the 1919 formula he proposed about communal award, about proportional representation of communities, where India is a cosmos, it's a cosmopolitan mixture of different religions, and religions were given adequate attention. But those people who didn't belong to either religion, what about their status? Meaning, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Sikh, or even if you're an Anglo-Indian, you had a proportional representation. But if you're an untouchable, it was given that you are part of a Hindu order, which means you did not need an adequate or proportional representation because you are part of the Hindu. So don't ask for extra, because Muslims and Sikhs are a different faith. You are still untouchable. Ambedkar is the only person of the times who makes as sharp and precise arguments to say that untouchables form a different unit than the Hindus. So the precursor of Ambedkar's arrival of Annihilation of Caste is the political fight that he has already waged in 1919. And he is been consistently experimenting about the politics of future for when it comes to reforming Hinduism, but also uplifting the untouchable castes, which then were 50 million. And today, the number is, of course, sixfold when we calculate all other religions in this space. 1930, Ambedkar is invited to Roundtable Conference. He goes as a representative of untouchables. And then in 1931, again, there is a second Roundtable Conference. And in 1932, finally, Ramsay MacDonald, the then Prime Minister of Britain, awards what he calls communal award, which is meant to recognize untouchables as a separate unit, which needs political protection, also which needs political representation like the Muslim, Sikhs, and other groups. To oppose this, Gandhi, the famed Mahatma, goes on a hunger strike. He threatens the world, most importantly Ambedkar, that if you claim an independent sovereign status for the untouchables, I will give my life. I will commit suicide, and then you are to blame. Ambedkar doesn't budge because he has toiled and sweated. 1932, Pune Pact is signed. It's a coercion. Ambedkar is forced into signing, and instead of the separate electorates, which would have given much more guaranteed of rights, Ambedkar gets what they call a reservation of seats, and in fact he gets more seats than what was decided. 1935, Ambedkar comes on stage at Yola. He's frustrated. 1935 Yola conference, he says, I was born a Hindu, but I will make sure I will not die one. So Ambedkar has already made his intentions amply clear. He's not gonna, he's renouncing the faith that he was born into. All other religion proponents approach Ambedkar and say, if you are, it's a 50 million people are coming into faith, it will be Sikhs come, Muslims come, Christians come, even a delegation of Buddhist monks visit him during that time. When Ambedkar announces that 50 million untouchable will leave Hinduism, that will really break the hierarchical order of Hindu Varnashrama Dharma, which is Hindu canon, Hindu religion. Because if you remove the feet, it's going to collapse. And in order to protect that, the progressive reformation group called Arya Samaj, formed by Swami Dayanand Saraswati, comes on stage, which is to exhort the dominant caste to give away certain practices so as to give equal status to the untouchables. As part of this Arya Samaj, Jat Path Todak Mandal. Now, if you translate it in English, it is Jat Path, caste and etc. or caste. Path is almost used as it's a linguistic arrangement. It's a Urdu, semi-Urdu, Hindustani word. Jat Path Todak breaking. So breaking of caste conference or breaking of caste group. A group that is form of 18 at times 19 members. Almost all belong to the dominant caste except one. The one who belongs to the Shudra caste, and at times his caste is recognized as untouchable, is the figure Santram. Santram is the secretary of Jatpat Todak Mandal, and a very educated, erudite person reaches out his first letter, and that's how Ambedkar starts his phenomenal text. Now, the text has to be understood with three prominent ideas, three prominent locus or loci. One, idea sphere. Two, the power of the strength or power of words. And third, the ability of sonic, the power of sonic. When ideas are developed into the mind, they need a space. They need either an audience which is verbally, which is sonically receptive, or readership, an eye which will go through the idea, so that there is a completion of idea. Idea cannot remain with only the person who is originating. It fulfills its purpose when it is gone out and beyond into the world. Idea sphere in this case is annihilation of caste. The idea about annihilating of caste is existing in Ambedkar since he has experienced humiliating treatments since he was in grade 5. Ever since Ambedkar is thinking about how to annihilate caste. So annihilation of caste is not just a text that has coming because Jatpat Todak Mandal has invited. That is major part of it. But the concept, the idea of providing or deciphering the Hindu caste system is already existing. Then Ambedkar puts down in his lyrical prose a very calling no spade, a strict scholar with 2 PhDs and couple masters, already several books to his credit. He's not there to be coerced. So he writes down the word, but annihilation of caste was never meant to be heard. The fortune of listening to the thunderous and to the elocution, to the amazing performance of Dr. Ambedkar, who has the capacity, who would move the masses, who were in 100,000s. We know that, especially when he gave Yevla address, but also when he converted to Buddhism in 1956. People would cry. People would have all these emotions, strong sense of belonging. And it's not only people that belong to his caste, people belonging across the spectrum. Ambedkar's voice was never meant to be heard. Why would it be? Because an untouchable thinking is itself a sin in a Vedic Hindu order. Because according to the Manusmrtis, untouchable is prohibited from even accessing to education, let alone producing or thinking his own idea that will eventually become knowledge. And then delivering the sermon from a pulpit of responsibility and exhorting, almost accusing and putting the blame on dominant caste was unheard before. And so if the speech would have been delivered, All India Radio, Associate Press, and the other foreign representatives would perhaps taken that record and spread it across the world. As we know, during the times of anti-colonial struggle, much of these tapes were spread across within the anti-colonial world, today what we call Global South or the preceding term of the Third World. So this text, to begin with, was not meant to be written, let alone delivered or even published. So Ambedkar here, so what we are reading is something that we should not have had happen. What we are dealing with is that was not meant to happen. So this is a very poetic justice of the time scale that we are currently witnessing through Annihilation of Caste. Now, we cannot get the essence of this highly important, and I say it's clairvoyant text, without hearing one of the greatest persuasive speakers who would have delivered with his handsome pitch, boisterous confidence, and of course, at times, delivery of each sentence would reverberate with applause or at times skirmishes by the audience who is listening to him. So now what do we do with a text that started as a censor? And it was not a censorship by the colonial state. It was by the Brahminical state, which is a para-state that was existing. And so that's why the twin colonizers within the Indian context or South Asia was, of course, one was the British Raj and the permanent colonizer, the Brahminical or what we call Brahmin Raj that existed. Now, this text is also not repeated. Ambedkar is not the kind of guy who will keep citing his text. You will not see Annihilation of Caste being cited by Ambedkar in subsequent text. The third edition, the second edition comes in 1937. The third edition comes in 1944. Ambedkar provides as to how much in demand this text was. Within 2 months, he said his 1,000 copies have been exhausted. And we have to understand, like we understood with the magazine crisis, within the counter-public sphere, people couldn't buy. So it was recycled. Like today, when we share our articles, it's a recycling of ideas. So, and it was meant to be in multiple languages. Santaram reaches out, says, "Dear Dr. Sahib," calling a Sahab, a sir, to an untouchable, but you have to now understand what that signifies. It means we are humbled to your knowledge, Dr. Ambedkar. We are progressive people within the coming out of the Orthodox Hindu fold. Dear Dr. Sahib, would you give us an opportunity to engage with you on a topic that we think is very important? Why is it important? Because Ambedkar has already said, I'm living Hinduism. They are trying to say, maybe we can convince him perhaps to reconsider some of his possibilities in a way that can look at this in a critical form, let alone providing more opportunities for Ambedkar-like people. The text can be divided into 7 parts, broadly 7 parts. The first is about hearing the untouchable voices, not untouchable or untouchable. It's untouchable voices. It is somebody putting that disability, but yet now coming to a state of having no other option but to now listen to what this person is saying. Now, one of the purposes of the Arya Samaj or the Jat Pat Todok Mandal, as some of us understood is, was trying to invite Ambedkar to their platform. And when you invite someone, the person is in a way indirectly responsible to kind of following the order or the decorum of the progressive. Ambedkar is not what we call a person who is Uncle Tom of equivalent. He's not. He is there to liberate his people. He's on a serious business. The second is reforms. Ambedkar is very much concerned about reforms. He's concerned about social reform. He's concerned about political reform. He's concerned about economic reform. And those three reforms are actually the political formations of the time. Indian National Congress, the party formed by the elites of Muslims and Hindus, mostly Brahmins, was there to at least start as a club of educated elites, and then eventually it became as a political reformation. But then people like Ranade, who proposed another progressive Brahmin, Ambedkar appreciates his work. Ranade comes across as one of the greatest proponents of a certain ideology of progressivism, and again doesn't limit himself, wants to have social reform preceding to political reform, and he ends up forming Indian National Social Congress or Indian National Social Conference. And the third is economic reform, and this is directed to socialist and the communist of the era. So Ambedkar is trying to look at the question of caste through these three predominant ideologies: political, economic, as well as social. The third is can be identified as critique of caste reason. Ambedkar provides a nuanced critique of the reasons that the castes or caste protectors give. Ambedkar is not shy about providing justice to the point of view from the naysayers, yet bringing up his own interpretation and reading, and Ambedkar has citations to give. Now, the texts he cites, especially Bhagavad Gita or Smritis, Gandhi critiques. He said he has used a text that doesn't, is invalidated text. He might have cited the Hindu canon, but that doesn't belong. And Ambedkar says, hold up. I actually cited Bal Gangadhar Tilak, the Orthodox Brahmin who didn't believe in social reform, but wrote a book on the Bhagavad Gita, known as Gita Rahasya. When he was lodged in prison for 6 years, that's when he published that book, and eventually it was republished in multiple languages. Fourth is the deadline for Hinduism. The Annihilation of Caste provides a deadline for Hinduism. He says, if you don't do it, we will have to write an epitaph very soon, unless you resolve this. The fifth point of view is the liberal interpretation of caste, which is Chaturvarnya, which was basically saying, okay, we don't like caste system. Jati, caste is Jati, we don't like that. We believe in Chaturvarnya, which is basically a liberal form of saying, we don't believe in, to put it in a sense, we don't believe in racism, but we believe in the structure of some sort of a color supremacy or color gradation. At the end of the day, so that's what Ambedkar then picks on the concept, and Gandhi is a proponent of Chaturvarnya. He's a proponent of this equivalent of a color type of supremacy, where he says the classes needs to be divided for a proper functioning of society. The sixth is plurality of caste, not least to Hindu, but also among Sikhs and Muslims. Because caste is not, and Ambedkar uses, Hindus have fouled the hair so bad that caste has now migrated to other religion. But then he makes a fundamental difference between why Sikh community, why Muslims differ from caste as opposed to the caste existing amongst the Hindus, because he says the lifeline of caste for Hindus is caste, whereas for Muslims and Sikh, it don't begin. That's not their concept. It has been incorporated, but that was not the genesis. And when you ask a Sikh or a Muslim what you are, they will tell themselves that they are Muslims or they are Sikh. They will not go identifying their subcaste. Of course, now it has changed. Now it has become much more of a subcaste politics. There has become a Jat Sikh, Ramgadiya Sikh, Ramdiya Sikh, Ravidas Sikh. Then we also find that in Ashraf, Pasmanda, and the Khatik and various kind of categorizations among Sikh. But when Ambedkar was saying, he was making Not that it didn't existed then, but it was not as prevalent. But for Hindus, it is very much a soul of its order. And of course, the last is, what do we provide as a remedy? The remedy in this case is, Ambedkar says, you need to destroy. You need to apply dynamite to what? To the beliefs. And where do these beliefs come from? Ambedkar says people who practice caste are not wrong. They are merely doing what they have been asked to do. Because the faith is so strong that people can move mountain. A pauper, but who has saffron clad or who has a religious kind of intonation, is being revered by millions. And he gives example of, all the sages and monks who are in India. What is it that is inspiring the belief within, or in caste system within the Hindu order? Ambedkar says these are the Shastras and the Vedas. Shastras and Vedas, he finds no reason to exist. They need to be altered. They need to be reformed. And for that reformation, you need to start. And this is a very interesting concept where he says you need to apply dynamite. By applying dynamite to that, you might reform Hinduism. So Ambedkar is still trying to make a case, but it is not taken, because if you destroy this, there is no way one can progress. And finally, Ambedkar says, I think the possible answer, which he gave in 1935, is conversion out of the religion. Now we'll go with some basic major points within the text, and then we'll invite conversations about this. Now, one of the things we have to understand is that Ambedkar is very clear. He says, I don't like to go to Hindu audience or Hindu platforms. I don't trust them. Why shall I go? Upon much insistence, so when Jat Path Todak Mandal approaches Ambedkar, that dear Dr. Sahib, would you like to come? Ambedkar says, I don't have time, go away. I don't want to do. Because Ambedkar is like, what I'm going to do to you? Just come and say, and you are still believe you are going to negate my thoughts. I don't want to waste my time. Then they send their representative, who after 6 days of torturous travel from Lahore, who comes down to Bombay to have a meeting, and Ambedkar is okay, fine. I will be happy to do it. But we will need to print. So please give your speech in advance. And Ambedkar certainly gives. Now, as Ambedkar says, and this is very important, and from his text I say, he says, and I quote, as a rule, he says, as a rule, I do not like to take any part in a movement which is carried on by caste Hindus. I don't want to do anything with this. I have my rules, I have my principles, let me live by. And why? Because their attitude towards social reform is so different, so tangentially on a different plane than mine, that I find it very difficult to pull on with them. I don't want to waste my time. And Ambedkar is not like first time dealing with caste Hindu. He had dealt with people within the political party of any form, Independent Labour Party. Prior to that, with Gandhi, and of course, during the 1920s, important decades, when he was leading the movement for entry into Kalaram or Mahad Satyagraha, considered one of the first civil rights movements of caste liberation in the Indian context. Now, why does Ambedkar decline? Ambedkar is very particular. Where shall he spend his time and energy? Because as you will see, when the episode of Ambedkar's withdrawal from or Ambedkar rather rejects going to, but it went after a lot of back and forth. He said, it has come with a lot of pain on my health. Ambedkar had to sit, had to work, and had to put together this text. So it was really impacting his health. It was really impacting his, of course, you would say mental and physical health at the same time, when he was undergoing through agonies. So when Ambedkar has to do something of this sort, we have to understand that Ambedkar is not just simply sitting and writing a text. He is also undergoing much of the labor, much of the pain that he has to undergo. And that's why, where will a Messiah, where will a Moses, where will a Jesus, or where will a Muhammad put his energy? Will they put energy with their people, or will they put energy with the naysayers? And the answer has shown in history that it has to start with your people, and then of course they will have it. Now, this Jat Path Todak Mandal is already trying to coax Ambedkar into coercions. Because when Ambedkar has written this text and he's already given the statements, the supporters of the Jat-Pat Todak Mandal, the dominant caste Hindus, are now want to leave the organization and want to boycott. But Jat-Pat Todak Mandal also wants to go. And how cleverly, some might use shrewdly, some might use the word crookedly, they say the Mandal has earned, or the question has earned a bad name because of all of this happened. So under these circumstances, Dr. Saab, it becomes your duty to cooperate with the Mandal. How insidious is that? That first you invite a person and then the person is refusing to buzz down. You bring it upon yourself and then you say it's your duty to cooperate with us by removing the sections that we find disfavorable to our audience. But Ambedkar was also, from his true metal, child of Ramji and Bhimabai, the great Mahars, as well as the people who belonged to the warrior clan. You know, he was a fighter, nevertheless, was proud of his history and belonged to the glorious, stories of the Buddhist ethic that these people were following so closely. Now the text goes on, and one of the reasons why does this text remain so personal to the radicals among Ambedkarites, radicals among Dalit, and I think this is what he says. Ambedkar says, I would not alter a comma in that speech. Ambedkar says, do you want me to remove? I will not even remove a comma. Do what you want to do now. Because this is a serious indictment. and I think this radical faith in yourself, the confidence to deliver truth to the people who are playing deaf and dumb, remains what becomes the part of modern Ambedkarite politics. There is no compromising. They will call out casteist on their face. And I think this is the legacy that Ambedkar has really laid a foundation. And Annihilation of Caste became, when I was growing up, whenever I won any competition in my neighborhood, in my slum that I grew up, there were two texts that were given us as a gift. One was Annihilation of Caste, of course, in Marathi, and Buddha and his Dhamma. These were the two texts that were very much available to us when we were growing up. Now, Annihilation of Caste, I've read first I read in Marathi, and Ambedkar makes so many English references that we don't make sense. And I think we should really give a shout out to S. Anand in this case, who has really provided beautiful annotations. So of course, at times he's also at a slippery slope when he kind of picks up on certain ideas which Ambedkar might not necessarily approve of, but nevertheless, the overwhelming annotations come with this persuasion. Ambedkar says, my health, and I repeat, my health was not equal to the strain it has caused. You have to understand, Ambedkar is in agony. This is deeply emotional, profoundly a moment of down for him, and as well as the people he believed in. This was one chance for the reformers within the Hindu canon to listen to this great person who they wanted to hear, but they lost the faith. And this is where he says, he really, and the way I read within this is the strain it has caused. Why has it caused a strain? If it was nobody, it would not have caused strain. But Ambedkar believed in some values of this, and that's why he says, I have to think about how my future will lay. And he makes it clear, this will be my first time to be invited, and I will comment to a Hindu conference, because he is very sure he will never be re-invited again. He's very confident about that, and he makes it very, very clear. Now Ambedkar says there is a relationship which is so tragic, which is the reformers among the Hindus and the self-reflecting untouchables. He calls them sect. Ambedkar stands as self-respecting untouchable. And you want to reform. We can't meet. It's a tragic relationship. It's never meant to be in the first place. So how does then this text become available to public? Ambedkar goes on to publish on his own, with providing these citations, and it is widely read across the board. Ambedkar says, and Ambedkar has said again, I am the most hated man in India. Now let just that sink in. Being the most hated man in India, When you open newspaper, someone has thrown a wrong accusation against you. Someone is trying to divide your political organization. Someone is trying to create a bad publicity for you, not least in newspaper, but also your opponents and the people who you think might also be your comrades. Ambedkar says in his beginning of the Jat Paat Todak Mandal address, they hate me. Who hate me? The Hindus. Now, how can you have a conversation or even begin to have a dialogue with someone who you already know hates you? How will you establish a relationship of fraternity? How will you establish a relationship of maitri when you already know the person you are speaking to is hating you? It takes enormous courage for a person to recognize that and yet believe in the possibility of somewhere little bit tiny humanity in other person who is still hating you. You are going into the den of wolves who are there to lacerate you. Yet Ambedkar says, I will go. He's giving a chance. Annihilation of Caste was a chance for the reformist Hindu sect to hear, even for if it was last time, and make corrections. They lost it, and the plot since then, as we know, has been losing, giving rise to what we have today in India, the Brahminical Hindutva that is flourishing. By ignoring Ambedkar, by ignoring his clarion call, we have produced a very messed up system that is taking turns into fascism and into worst form of oppression on every sort of dissent. Ambedkar is a dissenter. He is not dissenter of political lineage. He is not a dissenter for socials. He is not a dissenter for the people from the socialist, but he's also a dissenter for the spiritual side of political reformation. He remains a dissenter, and in that he is a criminal of a caste society who is being hated again and again. Yet Ambedkar never visits prison. Ambedkar is never incarcerated. That remains his genius, because Ambedkar is smart as well. He can't waste his time going to prisons and showing his bravado. He has 50 million people and he's the only one. He doesn't have Gandhi like Birlas and the Bania enterprises who are going to sponsor your visit. He's not Tilak, who can go and where you will have a Brahmin supporters writing about you. Once Ambedkar is in prison, that's it. That's the end story. We can close the books and you will see the reformers who are hyenas in his form would have taken this essence from the untouchable struggle. Ambedkar says the Hindus are sick of me. And that's why I have kept myself away from them. He's very clear. He is a persona non grata. So audience who's already thinking this person is unworthy, we are hating him, he's persona non grata, and we are sick of him. Why would you then muster the courage of going? Because he says, yours, and he says, because you fall into the line of social cause. You're not one who says, let's have freedom and let's figure out. That's a Fanonian question. Ambedkar raised that way before, which is, what do you do after colonization or decolonization? What's lying there? Oh, there is decolonizing too. If you would have listened to Fanon more clearly, we perhaps would not have appeared to the stage. He said, okay, it's fine. We have black republics in Africa. But do we know, is it a guarantee that the African would not turn himself or herself into a tyrant? It was not a guarantee. And he wanted to have this problem solved through, at least in Fanonian or in Ambedkar sense, through social reform. And he says, your cause has always appealed to me because you were political, you were social. Now, the political conservatives, the orthodox, Vyomesh Chandra Banerjee, Bengali Brahmin, Tilak from a Marathi Brahmin, these are the people who say, let us forget about cleaning ourselves. Let's get rid of the British first. Once they are gone, we will figure out our problem. Ambedkar says, hold up, what's happening? How is that possible? How will you have an independence when your system is dividing into thousands and thousands of castes? India has been subject of repeated colonizations, be it Mughals, be it Uzbeks, be it Turks, be it Mongols. Why did they come and colonize? Because a Kshatriya is only empowered to fight. And Brahmin, he says, I doubt the loyalty of a Brahmin, because when they were Mughals, they were administrator in Mughal Raj. When British came, they became administrator in British Raj. Now, after this will happen, it became a Brahmin republic. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Kashmiri blue-eyed Brahmin boy, becomes the first prime minister of India. This is the fear that Ambedkar is trying to bring forth. One might have a progressive politics, but one cannot hide the kind of caste census that informs them. So social reformers are also among Brahmins, and Ambedkar appreciates them. Ambedkar said, these are the people who are really taking the mantle and fighting against that. And that's why there was a bitter divide among Indian National Congress and Indian Social Congress. They had two conferences alongside each other, and the political side was condemning the social reformer group. Social reformer group was saying, we don't need political, we need to first address this issue of caste. What happens in this? Where is this progression of political future lie? And I think one possible remedy to this is that the reform that one is expecting to bring forward is reform not merely of a tokenized form. And it is here where one can see that reform has to be scientific. If it's a social reform, it has to rely on how a scientific society will look like. What science means is rationalization. Gopal Ganesh Agarkar, another reformer, atheist of his right from Western Maharashtra, again, a Chitpawan Brahmin himself, stands in contrast to people like Tilak, because they don't believe in the advancement of science and rationality to have a new nation state. Caste is an irrational, unscientific institution. How can you build an entire nation state in the absence of science or rationality? Ambedkar said, if you want to bring a new nation, that's why social reform being important. When you will build a nation, it will collapse. And Ambedkar is warning again and again and again. And I think by overlooking this promise of Ambedkar's clairvoyance, we again continue to revisit this text. Now, one of the questions that quite the Savarna or the dominant caste reformers bring is, for them, the social reform was about widow remarriage, was about concerning the child marriage. And widow remarriage and child marriage was a fact mostly concerning to the Savarna community, the people who were what Ambedkar called in a funny way, touchable castes. And touchable and untouchable here is living in distinction in the sense that who is touchable and who is untouchable. Ambedkar, for him, the touchables are the ones who belong to a community who are really benefiting from the touch of a something pure self, which is again a creation because there is a non-pure self outside. Hindu social reformers from the dominant caste, Rajaram, Mohan Rai and the likes, were concerned about women from their communities. Child marriage and all other issues were meant to follow. Had Savarna women not impacted by this, perhaps they would not have taken the cause, is one school of thought that could argue. Whereas the second, and Ambedkar is appreciating the social reformers who belong to the second group, which is who want to reform the Hinduism by abolishing the caste system. Now, this is the question we see today when the Savarna feminists say, why don't we talk about feminism as opposed to casteism? Well, Ambedkar had already talked about you in 1936 by saying we need to address the issue of caste because caste has the element and essence of female oppression. What gives a man patriarchal right? What makes him the part of male order as a lawgiver? It is the protection of caste codes that are given, and women in the Hindu scriptures are Shudras, are the service providing outcasts. And that is evidence from the way women were treated inside as well as the outside house. And I think Ambedkar is not just providing a overall perspective, but also he says that when people talk about economic reforms, because they were third school of thought that came about say, let's have economic reform. Why only political or social? Because man, it's a Marxist interpretation. Man is an economic entity. They produces property. One of the sources of power is property. And because man is an economic creature, very much Marxist tone, we should actually address economic reforms. Now, Ambedkar says, it's very interesting. He says, in a country social status provides power, not your economic status. And how does he prove? He says, Brahmin, they are poor people, but they are still at the top. When you say poor in the sense of kingly class, they are not monarchs. They are not at the top head. What does provide them an absolute authority is the social status. So Ambedkar is also concerned, not that he is negating the economic necessity. We all know he is the founder of first Labour Party in India, which was known as Independent Labour Party. So let that not also be a reason to accuse of him being ignorant of the economic interpretation of history, but he's making a point of how social status is the centrality in this. And I think when Ambedkar is talking about the reformers, especially the Chaturvarna system, the kind of a progressive view of caste system, which is saying instead of 4,000 castes, let's have 4 classes: Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Ambedkar says, how is that different than having this multiple thousand castes? And he goes to explain that if you're from the dominant caste, you're happy to have that label. You're happy to be a Brahmin because nothing is going to be taken away from you. If you belong to Kshatriya, again, you're harmonious in a society. But when we associate these independent classes with a religious code, it becomes pernicious. If they stand alone on their own on the basis of principality of merit, then it's a different question. And Ambedkar says, let a Brahmin by birth not be a priest. We should have exams, all India entrance exam like ICS, Indian Civil Services, and let the people from all castes apply for that, and whoever becomes, and they should be provided by state. The state should oversee it. He said, let's have more approach, and of course that would not have been taken different. But the Hindu caste system is based on birth, and that's the fundamental difference. It's not based on your merit. You are born. Your caste is given in the womb of your mother. Your mother, even before she conceives you, your caste is decided. And that lives by it. You don't have to work to become upper, and you certainly don't have to work to become lower. Your mother's womb is, if you belong to an untouchable womb, is cursed with that, with intergenerational sins that are graded into her womb, and that's how you become an untouchable. So, are people going to recognize a person based on their worth or based on their birth? Is a question that we need to understand. If a person, let's say India's current president, is a Dalit, is he given the status because of his birth or because of his worth? This remains an open question. The Shankaracharya, is he the Shankaracharya of Hindu religion because of his worth or because of his worth? The birth and worth is a question that remains fundamentally undivided because everybody kind of almost has a big divide between these two theories. And this is not unique. Of course, the birth and worth to Indian Hindu society or Indian society as a whole, it's also occurring in other parts of society. The only difference in other society is the birth-based democratization of that has slightly changed, where here it is a strict order that one has to follow. So Ambedkar says, and I quote him, so long as the names, for example, Brahmin name, Ambedkar says, the Chaturvarna is about names. He said, what do you need names? if you need to have a worth, then you don't need names. Remove the names, Brahmin, Kshatriya, but why do you want to have? Because it comes with a loaded historical supremacy. It gives you status, it gives you access. It's the political economy that you can use, and you see that happening in India. He says, the names, for example, within Hindus, for so long as this name continue, the Hindus will continue to think of the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra as hierarchical divisions of high and low based on birth, and to act accordingly. Now, the Hindus need to unlearn all of this, because you can just change the classes, but people already know what a Brahmin means. People already know what a Kshatriya means. So even though you make a 4 classes based on merit, you are still creating an hierarchical society, which is not good for any democratic society to progress, because people will still give a reverential status to the Brahmin and degrading insults to the person who belongs to the Shudra and lower caste. And Ambedkar then again talks about plebeians and patricians. Ambedkar gives citations also of the Irish Home Rule movement. Ambedkar also talks about how different traditions and different historical incidents have dealt with the questions, and he gives an example of Brahmins. He says the responsibilities on Brahmins. Are Brahmins ready? The plebeians and patricians, especially in the Roman era, where they said, okay, we'll have a democracy, but the oracle, the power of the supreme, was given to patrician. So whenever and the patrician, he was meant to interpret the god's wishes. So whenever plebeians were in majority, whenever they went to present their viewpoints, patrician would say, oh, the god doesn't approve with that. So even though there was a democracy of the plebeians, they were given seats, but the supreme authority lie with a person who was the final. And in this case, it was Brahmin. So can Brahmins reform? And he says, no. I mean, will a Brahmin take the courageous stand to reform himself or herself? And it is certainly wrong. And so to conclude with final three remarks to this text, and of course we will go deep into it. One of the reasons that Ambedkar equates Chaturvarnya with Plato's Republic, and it's very interesting how Plato, of course, we know, Plato's kind of, because even if you pigeonhole people into various classes, he says it is impossible to accurately classify people into 4 definite classes, because if you make classes, you will turn into multiple subclasses. It's not going to remain in one, because once you open the possibility of forming into a class, you will have subclasses. And that's why in India currently there are 12,000 subcastes that are existing in India, and 12,000 subcastes are their own nation state. And that's why when we call India as a nation state, we need to ask question, if with 12,000 caste nations existing, how can it be a nation state? And again, one can point out to Ambedkar's constitution, who in a very ironical way actually writes India's constitution to unite this castes. Now, Rama in the episode of Ramayana kills Shambhuka. Now, Shambhuka is a person who is a Shudra, Shambhuk, and he says Rama killing Shambhuka is part of his Kshatriya duty. He would not have, he says, to blame Rama for killing Shambhuka, the Shudra who was excelling in his spiritual practices and would have attained the higher self. He says to blame Rama for killing Shambhuka is to misunderstand the whole situation. It's a very interesting interpretation Ambedkar provides. He says Ram Raj was a Raj based on Chaturvarna. So if you want to bring Ram Raj, when people say today also Ram Raj, we want to bring, it is basically a caste Raj. It's a ruling of various castes, and caste in the sense of supreme, the dominant caste, households who remain responsible for running affairs of the country. And when I say household, I really mean households. Few households which are running the ruling elite, maybe they now are Baniyas or we are Brahmins, they continue to hold infinite power compared to the rest of the masses. As a king, Rama was bound to maintain Chaturvarnya, because that's a responsibility. As if you are part of Chaturvarnya, you have a responsibility to maintain the caste system. And he saw his duty to protect the dharma, to protect the dharma is Chaturvarnya, to kill Shambhuka. So these are the kind of exhortations Ambedkar brings. And then there are people like Professor Radhakrishnan, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, who actually provides a defense of the Hindu order. And Ambedkar says, people say, caste has harmonized society. And why? Because look at us, because there were so many invasions and we still remain strong. The dharma remained strong. There are many short-lived civilization, but Indian civilization is such a long. Why? It has sustained itself. Claps. It's because of the Chaturvarnya system. Now Ambedkar says, it seems to me the question is not whether a community lives or dies. The question is, on what plane does it live? There are different modes of survival. What are different modes of survival? For a Brahmin, it's a different mode. For a Shudra, it's a different mode. For a Banya, it's a different mode. Each have their own interpretations and modes of survival. But not all are equally honorable. For Ambedkar, there is a gulf, there is a difference between living and living worthy. Ambedkar prefers living worthy. Worth comes with dignity. Ambedkar's fight is for the dignity, and any self-respecting person, working class or person fighting for any forms of injustices, is seeking the injustice. Finally, to culminate this important text, which has so much that Ambedkar keeps on providing much of citations, is to say that if you have to reform Hindu social order, how then to abolish caste? If you really need to, what is the proposition? He says, castes, before you abolish the subcastes. Many people have to understand caste system is an abstract idea. Subcastes are actual idea, the jatis. Jatis is where you are not a Brahmin. You are Saraswat Gaud Brahmin. You are Chitpavan Brahmin. You are Kharde Brahmin. You are not just Banya, you are Marwadi Banya. You belong to a certain sect of the Banya. Each subcaste and subcaste also have subcastes. So he says, if we need to address this, let's go with the subcaste. And he gives a very interesting example. He says, people think that subcaste and caste are the same. He says, no. The Brahmins of northern and central India are socially of lower grade compared to the Brahmins of the Deccan and South India. And it's true, the South India Brahmins, especially the Shankaracharya, is a South Indian Brahmin. They commanded control, and they had access to capital. North Indian Brahmins, who became rogue and became fundamentalists in its eventual formulation of what we call Hindutva or the Brahminical Raj, had enormous participation of North Indian Brahmins, who were, and he says, the North Indian Brahmins are cooks and water carriers. They merely cook. The Maharaja, the name is given. So these are not high status Brahmins when it comes to social working. But the North India, when we look at the context of caste, or I call them pet Brahmin castes, or the Vaishya, they are superior than the people of South and Deccan India. So to formulate all India definition, it's difficult. So how do you address this? By addressing the issue of subcaste, which is very local and which is very abolition. So therefore, what he says is abolition of subcastes will necessarily lead to abolition of caste. Ambedkar proposes intercaste marriage, but also he sees that there is a problem, because just merely interdining and intermarriage will just do, he says, what he calls notional change of mind, because for him, caste is a state of mind. It's not something that is physically built. It's not a barbed wire, but it has been in your mind so strong. And that's why one of the most striking opponent of this disease was Buddha, because he went straight to the mind. Buddha worked with the physics of mind to really remove people from these barriers that have been created. And for me, for Ambedkar also, it is not about man. It is also about woman. And I quote him, he says, make every man and woman free from the thraldom of the Shastras, cleanse their mind of the pernicious notions founded on the Shastras, or he or she will interdine and intermarry without your telling him to do or do so. Ambedkar is saying, let's liberate both men and women. And that lies the secret recipe of the success of Ambedkarite tradition, to work consistently for the liberation of men and women both. And that is how we see annihilation of caste is to liberate the men and women attached, attracted, affixed within the dangerous consumerist and calumnious culture of caste. To abolish caste is then to establish a society which is based on Ambedkar's ideal, liberty, equality, and fraternity, which he says he doesn't take that from French Revolution, but from his master, the Buddha. Annihilation of Caste is also a Buddhist text in its way, which is secularized in its more profound sense, that how we resurrect a society is based on these three fundamental values. Caste is anti-maitri, anti-friendship, is anti-fellowship. We need to add fellowship to it. You need to add fraternity. Fraternity here means the larger basis of forming a society. And for that, if you need to lose the, what he says, caste is a perpetual lease on life. So if you need to remove the perpetual lease of life, you need to think beyond caste. And for that, let's revisit the dynamic approaches of how we look at Hindu Dharma, Hindu Shastra, and as well as the making of the caste republic, what Professor Anand Tiltumade calls is Republic of Caste, where he looks at the neoliberal context of India, and as well as the Brahminical Hindutva that we see today growing and flourishing like poppy seeds in Afghanistan. Thank you.